I've lived in America for 8 years now, long enough to stop reacting, long enough to stop comparing, and long enough to admit something that many Aussies don't always say out loud. America does some things extremely well.
You better take cover.
If you live overseas long enough, something strange tends to happen. Now, at first, everything feels different. You compare constantly. You measure everything against what it's like back home. You notice things that are missing. There's no Vegemite on the shelves. You notice what's louder. You notice what doesn't sit right. And if you're not careful, that can become your whole lens. You become the person who only sees what's wrong. But eventually, the comparison softens. You stop reacting. You start observing. And when you do that, you begin to notice something else. Strength. Not patriotic slogans, not surface level cliches. Structural strengths. The kind of things you only see once you've lived inside a culture long enough to stop defending your own. And there are things that America genuinely does very well. Not better in a competitive sense, not chalking up runs on the scoreboard, just very well. And I think it's important to say that out loud. Now, the first one is confidence and self-promotion. This one stretched me personally the most because I didn't grow up in a culture that rewards self-declaration. In Australia, humility is social currency. If you do well, you downplay it. If someone compliments you, you deflect it. And if you're capable, you let other people notice first. There's a reflex towards understatement, and tall poppy syndrome is part of that wiring. Stand too tall, someone will trim you back. So when I moved to the United States, the confidence was confronting. People say clearly what they're good at. They'd outline their experience without any apology. They'd apply for roles before they felt completely ready for that jump. And at first, I probably mistook that for ego. But over time, I realized something important. Confidence here isn't automatically interpreted as arrogance. It's interpreted as clarity. It's, this is what I bring. And I think that difference matters, especially in a country with more than 12 times Australia's population. In Australia, you often wait to be invited. In America, you're expected to take that step forward. And that expectation changes your behavior. I've watched people back themselves into opportunities simply because they were willing to speak up, not because they had everything figured out already, because they didn't assume that they needed permission to try. Now, as an introvert, that's still a bit of a stretch for me. There's a part of me that instinctively softens statements, adds qualifiers, rounds the edges. But I've also come to expect that a culture that doesn't automatically punish visibility. Because when visibility is normalized, possibility expands. And that to me is a strength. That confidence doesn't exist in isolation. It connects to something that I didn't fully appreciate until I left Australia and then went back for a visit. Customer service and hospitality. So we went back home for a visit last year, and I remember walking into a cafe for breakfast in Canberra. The service was fine. It was efficient, professional, very straightforward. But something felt different. No one greeted us first. There was no eye contact on entry, no proactive warmth. We ordered, we paid, we sat down. The bacon was great. But it hit me. I'd gotten used to American hospitality, and especially living here in Tennessee in the South. Here, when you walk into a shop, someone usually acknowledges you straight away. How y'all doing today? There's eye contact. There's a smile. There's some form of initiation. Now, don't get me wrong, Australians are friendly, absolutely. But the style is different because in Australia, friendliness often unfolds once the interaction begins. In America, friendliness often starts the whole interaction. And that initiative changes the atmosphere of public spaces. It lowers social barriers. It creates ease between strangers. And it's remarkably consistent. Restaurants, grocery stores, school events, even down at Home Depot. There's an assumption that part of your role, if you're serving someone, is to make them feel welcome. And that's nice. It's not just processed. When you live long enough inside that, it just becomes normal. You stop noticing it until it's gone. And then you realize how much emotional energy proactive warmth saves. It says you're okay here. I think that matters more than what we admit. Because hospitality isn't just politeness, it's atmosphere. And America does atmosphere very well. There's something else underneath that though, because warmth and confidence together, well, they create movement. And movement creates scale. Which brings me to something that still makes me smile every time I see it. If you've never been to a Buc-ee's, it's difficult to explain. The first time I drove into one, I thought I was at an airport. These are the largest gas stations in the world. Bright lights, rows upon rows of petrol pumps, a convenience store the size of a shopping centre, walls of snacks, freshly made jerky in dozens of different flavours, and diner-sized food choices. There's merchandise, a beaver mascot that roams the store. It's almost theatrical in size, and yet it works because it represents a mindset. Australia tends to build what's needed. It's functional, practical, proportional. America often builds what scales. The question isn't just, will this business serve the town? It's how far can this go? And that continent level thinking shifts everything, shifts how businesses grow, how schools operate, how sport is structured, and how systems are designed. There's an assumption of expansion, an expectation that something good should multiply. And that expectation fuels ambition. And sometimes it produces excess, but sometimes it produces brilliance. But it undeniably produces momentum. So Australia's strength is grounded practicality. America's strength is expansive ambition. And when you live inside that scale mindset, you start to see just how much opportunity that it generates. Because scale creates pathways, and pathways, well, that changes lives. Which leads to the fourth thing, and perhaps the one that ties everything together: encouragement culture. Encouragement in America is visible. It's expressed. You see it at school assemblies, at local sports games, dance competitions. Parents cheering loudly, teachers praising publicly, strangers saying, "You've got this," clapping for yourself. Now, at first, the volume surprised me because it feels big. In Australia, encouragement absolutely exists, but it's often more quietly, with a subtle "good on you," a private acknowledgement, a nod. In America, encouragement is often done out loud, and that makes risk feel safer. When effort is publicly acknowledged, trying just becomes normal. Failing becomes survivable. And there's something formative about growing up in a culture where affirmation is expressed regularly, where someone says in front of others, "We're proud of you." That reinforcement builds confidence almost by default. And when confidence, hospitality, and ambition all combine, you get forward momentum. You get people willing to try, willing to step up, willing to apply, because culturally they've been encouraged to do it. And encouragement here isn't implied, it's delivered. And that delivery builds belief. Now, living overseas has taught me something that I didn't expect. Is you don't lose your identity by recognizing someone else's strengths. You don't become less Australian by respecting America. You expand. Australia gave me humility, directness, perspective. And America has given me confidence, hospitality, scale, encouragement. I get asked a lot in the comments which place I prefer. And it's not really a question that I can answer because both places are my home. And to be honest, if someone forced me to choose, I probably wouldn't choose either. Because living in the islands shaped me as well. Samoa, Fiji, Tuvalu, Tonga. They sit still underneath everything. But not as an alternative, but as part of the foundation. And holding all of that at once, it feels like maturity. Not a competition between countries or destinations, just clarity. And clarity, I've realised, is something that we could all use just that little bit more of. Hooroo, mateys.
You better take cover.